laundry and groceries. Like you're staying in places for just a few days.
Yeah.
Does it really make sense to run to the grocery store? We have to find a laundromat. Like, what was that like trying to get those things done?
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us on the Financial Pathway Podcast with Nate Skelly, where we discuss important financial questions and give you practical advice to guide you on your financial journey. If you enjoy the podcast, consider subscribing and leaving us a review. You can also follow the Financial Pathway page on Facebook for more helpful financial tips and videos.
That was another thing you can filter by with laundry. So
Oh, right.
I would book as many places as possible that had laundry in the building.
Thankfully, we went every other stay with the laundry. Sometimes we did go to a laundromat, but yeah, I mean, they don't have dryers in Europe typically. So that's another thing is that you are only there for a few days. So it's quick go in, start your laundry so that you can have 3 days for it to dry or whatever. But yeah,
we had a system.
Pack his wet clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite drying time. So that was one thing. Groceries, honestly, the convenience of the grocery stores at home was one of the things I miss the most because you can just go get whatever you want and read the ingredients and it's easy. So we did some grocery shopping. I don't know. It depended on the place. If it was pretty inexpensive to go out and just grab something, from a restaurant or takeout place or whatever, we would do that. Some places we try to grocery shop more, like Switzerland, where it's super expensive.
I was going to ask about that. Of the places that you went, where would you say was wow, this is actually really affordable, like most of the stuff here? And where were the places where it's oh, this is steep, this would be tough to stay here for a long time?
Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Italy and Spain, in my mind, were easy, less than the US.
You can find amazing lodging for pretty cheap. The food is cheap, and that's also really good food too. Whereas Switzerland, it's so amazing, but
the scenery is
for sure top 5. It's unreal. But the food cost and the food it's also just average food. I think it's okay. Normal. So the cost of that, it kind of it left a sour taste in our mouth when we were trying to have a reasonably priced days. Maybe
yeah, because we obviously were gone for such a long time. So we really had to think about how much are we spending in this week versus this week or whatever. Yeah. So Switzerland, I think the food in the UK was about the same as the US, maybe a little bit more. France was expensive.
The dollar to pound difference did kind of get us there for a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, in the UK.
Yeah. But
yeah,
I mean, it all worked out at the beginning. We were cutting, we were kind of pinching pennies at the beginning because we didn't know how this whole thing was where it's gonna go.
Yeah.
For probably the first month and a half, we're I don't know, we got to be really tight on this, and then difference from us being tight and just enjoying ourselves a little more after we got the rhythm wasn't that much. So that's why I was
we'll just enjoy it more and it's gonna be fine. And it was. So
we know what we can do and what we can't do. So
yeah.
Well, you were talking about some of the different financial adjustments that you made. So you rented your house out. Did that cover your mortgage payment then, or is it even more?
It was $1,000 more than our mortgage payment a month, which was a huge blessing. And then we didn't.
And that's really how we were able to do it too. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was huge. And then we didn't pay utilities, so that was another few $100 a month that we weren't paying. And so it was, and we got super blessed. We bought our house in 2020 and we got a good whatever. So we had some things going for us that made it work out well. Yeah.
That's awesome. We of the things because you can anticipate okay, we're gonna have housing and travel from getting around and food. Were there any things that you're oh, I didn't quite anticipate that was actually a little bit of a surprise and we had to adjust on the fly once you got overseas?
Well,
What are you?
Financially or just in general?
Oh, either one.
What were you gonna say?
What are you talking about, Israel?
Oh, well,
Oh, yeah. You got it. Okay.
want to
Yeah, you
be-
got to share this story.
That was a big
Um,
adjustment.
I'll say first before we get into that.
Okay.
Financially, we had to, like, transportation costs was for sure like one of the biggest differences. Like, it was more than I thought it was gonna be.
Because of the prices of gas too, right?
Gas, like I did not realize
Comparatively.
how cheap gas was in the States compared to the rest of the world. Like, we're like one of the cheapest. So I didn't know that. And so that was a big difference when we were driving. There's like some fees when you go on trains as much as we were that aren't, they don't really show you that when you're buying these. Like, we had the train to rail pass stuff where we could just kind of hop on and off trains. There were some things like that. So transportation was probably the biggest one. Food was pretty consistent. Everything else was like basically what I had planned for it to be. Because I got into the weeds of like all the museums we'd want to go into each place and what it would cost for the entire trip. So I knew
Everything. We
that was
did get
consistent.
some surprising like tickets and
Oh,
like
yeah.
fines.
Oh, really?
Because we couldn't understand the language. So Josh, at one point, it was like really early in the morning. It was like 6 a.m. We were on a train and we were in France. And he had his like, so the seats are, so you're facing one another, right? And so there's a seat in front of you. No one's in the seat in front of you, but he had his feet up on the seat in front of him. And a guard or, you know, whatever train staff came by and gave him a fine and like chewed us out for having the feet on the seat. And like, it was really, I was so annoyed by that. It was like 70
Yeah.
or
It was 70 euro.
70 euro.
Which is
like it
forever.
was just like ridiculous.
Or
Yeah.
75, 80 bucks.
Your feet
So-
on this. Wow.
Yeah.
He called-
Maybe
Yeah.
it's something like where people do that to like block people, so it's like considered like very rude because like people don't want anybody sitting across
like,
from them.
no
They'll
one
do
around us. It was like an empty car, but they now reading
Yeah.
up on it say that it's like rude and Americans do it, and you know
It's
we
like
wouldn't
a-
consider that necessarily like rude where we come, you
Yeah.
know, we are. So
well,
consider it
every
comfortable.
every other country, they're leaving their feet on.
like that was the most ridiculous one. But a few things like that happened a few times where it's like, okay, I don't want to get any more fines.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, but we did have to adjust big time because we went to, so because of our US passport, it's actually really awesome. Like you can travel pretty much anywhere. So for us to go to Europe, there's what's called the Schengen zone. And so we were in the Schengen zone, but you can only be in the Schengen zone for essentially like 90 days. And then you got to leave for 90 days and then you can come back in. So mainland Europe was the Schengen zone. So during the 3 months that we were out, we went to the UK and Scotland, Ireland, and we also went to Israel. And so we were in Israel in October during the attack. And so we had to adjust our plans from there.
Yeah, we were there, and actually your brother,
Yeah, Joshua.
Joshua, was the one, my brother-in-law, you know, if everyone remembers that connection. I'm not checking Israel news. Like, we were just out seeing stuff in Israel.
Yeah, it was a
He-
Saturday.
Yeah, he texted me, was like, don't go like south because we were in the north part of Israel.
Mhm.
Comes, you know, we come to realize what's going on. We go to the airport. We're like, okay, we can't go back in the Schengen zone because of like
You're skipping over all of the interesting parts.
Okay.
Okay,
I
so,
got
so we get the text, or I don't know, interesting if it's that's the right word, but like we get a text for Joshua. We don't have any plan. We don't know what we're supposed to do. And the idea was like, oh, we're super far away from Gaza, but I mean, super far in Israel means like a 2-hour drive.
Well, I guess and
Right.
we were supposed to be in Israel for a couple more weeks,
Yeah.
and then we were supposed to go to Petra for a few days, Jordan, and then we're gonna go
Mhm.
to Egypt for like 7 days or something, and you know, see the pyramids, do all that, and then we were gonna jump. Then our time would restart. We'd jump back into like Europe.
Yeah. So then basically we get this text. We're like, what do we do? And then their, you know, family's concerned, and we weren't really sure what was going on. In Israel, we had been sightseeing like all morning, all day while everything was going on. We had no idea. So then we like quickly pack our bags. Thankfully, we had a rental car. We didn't have to rely on public transportation. And we had to drive 2 hours back to Tel Aviv, where the international airport is, and heard bombs like the whole drive. And Josh had to get out of the car to get gas, and it was just like felt painfully long. And then we get to the airport and we drop off our rental car, and they were like, "Oh, I can't believe you guys missed it. You know, for the past 60 minutes, there's been like constant sirens, and we all just like crawled out of the bomb shelter because we
And
have
then
all
you're just pulling
died."
up like, here we are.
Yeah. And we're like, all right. And so they were like, if you need a bomb shelter between here and the airport, like this is where they are. And it was like, oh my gosh. So then we get to the airport and we had no plan, like none. We didn't have any.
Yeah, because you
sort
don't have a flight yet.
yeah, we didn't have a flight. We didn't, we just had our stuff. But thankfully, like I had randomly, we've connected with a few friends, and through like my mission stuff, there are more people who are, out living in different countries and whatever else. And so one of my friends had recently been to Montenegro, and I remembered her like posting about it and saying she loved it and whatever. And so I just had asked her about it. I was like, if we could get a flight to Montenegro, like this is our situation. Can you help find a place for us to stay if I can find a flight? And she was amazing and found us a place.
Well, I was driving.
And yeah.
But that was the funny part. It's like all this stuff's going on, and I guess I'm just like going to go through normal rental car return procedures. So like,
Yeah.
it's like, I guess so,
And that was really interesting too when you got out and got the gas.
Yeah, I got
got
gas.
that.
That was when we like heard all the bombs or the Iron Dome blocking stuff.
Yeah, Iron Dome.
Everybody else was like really calm, just filling up gas, and I guess I was too. But it was like just a weird situation, like a city
Yeah.
being bombed, and then you're just like,
And then
filling up gas so you turn the car on.
And then
It's like,
the gas station, like in order for him to get gas, it wasn't working, and it said like you had to put in your ID. And so
Oh.
Josh asked someone like, and the person helping like didn't know as much English, and so it was like, what did he say to you? Like the
Yeah.
number of man,
It was like
your
the
number of man.
And I was like, the number of man. I was like, my social security number, and he was like,
He's like,
sure, I don't know. And I was like, I put him.
Yeah, it was
I
so
put in my
confusing.
social security number into this gas station. And it accepted it. It allowed me to get gas. I was like, I don't know, but
Yeah,
I could
it
just
didn't
put in
really
any
make
number,
sense.
maybe. I don't-
Right.
I
You
shouldn't
have to
have.
assume that it was like, yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't have given that number. I don't know.
Yeah. So anyways, we ended up waiting through the night at the airport we got on a flight to Montenegro, and it ended up being really inexpensive, which was amazing because everyone else was trying to fly to these big hubs like Rome and London and whatever else, Paris. And we were watching all the flights get canceled and overhearing and talking to other Americans at the airport who were spending like $4 or $5 grand like on a ticket to get home, like just crazy. And so we ended up waiting. I was nervous that like we were waiting too long to get on a flight because basically we left at, I think it was like 10 a.m. or something on Sunday morning from the airport. We were on the tarmac for like 45 minutes because they basically had to make sure the skies were clear in order for us to leave. And then that same day at like 8 p.m., then, they were targeting the airport with bombs and stuff. So it was crazy. So that was a big, change in our plans.
So then I had to adjust a lot of stuff, because then we had to adjust like where we were staying,
Yeah.
how we were getting back to where we
Yeah.
were going.
Because you didn't do Jordan and Egypt after that.
No, didn't do Jordan, Egypt. We're like, okay, we can connect back. We were going to be in Madrid. That was going to be our next like Europe thing. So like, well, I guess we can stay here. And then we hopped over to Serbia, and then we can connect to where we were going to be in Madrid, and then do the rest like normal.
Yeah.
Which we did. It worked out great. Israel is expensive. Montenegro is crazy cheap. So it ended up like, and most of our,
Saving us money.
yeah, it ended up like not really being like a financial
crazy.
hit, which was a blessing.
And Montenegro was like one of my favorite spots of the whole trip. Like, I'm so glad we got together. I would totally recommend it. It's so inexpensive. It's hard to get to, but yeah, it was beautiful.
It was that was the biggest hidden gem, like the biggest surprise our
Yeah.
whole trip was, maybe because of
Yeah.
the situation we were coming from too, but
It was definitely a
but-
Sure,
saving
right. Seems so
Nobody
much better.
wanted
Yeah.
It's like Switzerland on the ocean.
Yeah, it was
and
really
less
pretty, and it
developed.
felt really safe. Like, it was actually one of the few places that I felt comfortable, like, walking around anytime, like, by myself. So,
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I think that would surprise a lot of people. They would kind of think Balkans, it would be right, less safe and just not very pretty. But I've heard, I can't speak from experience like you guys, but I've heard Montenegro is just an incredibly beautiful place. So that's amazing.
So awesome.
yeah.
So let's say, all right, so trying to bring this conversation back, because I know you could, and I could talk about this for a long time, but let's trying to intersect this with, hey, financially, people, I think listeners, you're hearing this and you're like, okay, that's awesome. Maybe some of you are thinking, I'd love to do something like that. Maybe not quite to the extent of like 9 months, but something. And I'll just speak personally. That's something that my wife and our family, like, we're planning to do something similar, not that long of a trip, but to go abroad for an extended period of time and just really be able to immerse ourselves in a place or a few different places and just experience more of an extended trip. What advice, what recommendations would you give to somebody if they're planning to do something like what you did?
Yeah.
I think I would just like get really specific about what you exactly want to do and define that, and then see what it takes to do it. And then, like, how serious are you about doing it? And then how can you in your life situation figure out how to make it happen? Because whatever it is that someone wants to do, like, it's gonna probably be worth it if you like move the pieces enough to make it happen. Because that's what we found out. Like, we had never done, well, your mission stuff is pretty adventurous. I would just like say go adventure, like go do something out of your comfort zone or out of the box a little bit and figure if it's something you want to do and it's a dream you have. Um, like, instead of looking at things and being like, oh, I wish I could do that, or I want to do that, I'd be like, how could I do that? Or what do I want to do? And how could I do that?
And like, what
And
adjustments can I make? And I mean, you did do a ton of research. And so, like, putting forth that effort to research and really figure out, like, is this doable or not? Or if not, like, how can I make it doable in order to get to have, X, Y, and Z experience. But for us, like, it was so worth it. It wasn't just like a fun adventure, but it really kind of gave us such a different perspective on life and our future and what we want to do. And yeah, and obviously not everyone has that same exact setup. It was a big blessing, but just to be able to do things outside of your comfort zone, I think it's always worth it, and helps you grow as a person.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. I think there's a natural inclination for people to look at things and say, I can't afford that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some people that look at things and say, how can I afford that?
Mm-hmm.
It's just a mentality.
Yeah.
And I want to try to be as self-aware as I can coming into this conversation, because I know how some people will think around things like this. They'll be like, oh yeah, well, must be nice. Must be nice to have remote jobs, and well, you didn't have to bring any kids with you on this trip, and you were able to rent your house out. Like, there's always a million things that people can present as far as, well, hey, that's cool that you got to do that, but I could never do that because A, B, or C reason. What would you say to somebody who's a little bit envious, that actually would want to do what you can do, but they feel like, well, but I couldn't. You guys can because this, I can't because I have all these different reasons. I mean, what would you say to somebody that would be in that position?
Emma, what would you say?
What would I say? I mean, obviously what we did was really unique in our timeline and exactly how the trip worked out. But I think just having an open perspective of if there's something that you really want to do and you're willing to put effort into figuring it out, you can make adjustments. But I think when you have that idea, right, like that you're saying, like the limiting, like I can't do that for X, Y, and Z, like maybe that's actually true. Like maybe you do have those limitations, but I think sometimes we don't even allow ourselves to think beyond that. We don't allow ourselves to think beyond, oh, I just can't do that. Okay, I'm moving on. But I think to realistically put thought and effort into thinking about it more, looking at your current situation, seeing what's non-negotiable for you in life and what is, things that you could let go of to make space for other experiences. And then, yeah, making decisions based off of that. And maybe the answer is no, you can't do it in this season of life. And that's great too. But I think even just exploring that idea is something that isn't super common.
Yeah, I think too, like when you look at, because I mean, we constantly see other people doing cool. That's what social media does for us now, right? We see all the cool things
Yeah.
people are doing, right? So we can become envious. But I think the first question is like, one, like, is that something I'd want to do? Like, if the answer is yes, then do I really want to do it, or do I just think it's cool? Okay, if I just think it's cool, then it's just something to enjoy, like seeing happen. But if it's like, oh, I actually would want to do that, like, what does that mean? Figure that out. Maybe see if you can make it happen. Or if you're like, no, that's not something I don't want to do, then you can sit back. Where instead of just responding with like, oh, I can't do that, or envy, which just shuts your brain off and then just allows you to never think about it again and, be okay with that. It's kind of more.
I think also, like, I mean, this is like on a deeper level, right? But when you're chasing after all these things, like some might look at it and be like, oh, I will really be happy when I travel for 9 months around Europe, or when I really have that ultimate experience with my spouse, or, do this with my family. And it's like, when you realize too, that's not going to fulfill you or provide you, ample joy. It's just going to be a cool experience. But when you make it this, I don't know, big idea to fulfill you, then you get there and then you're disappointed and then you're like, actually, that didn't do it. And so for us, like it was more of a decision too around like, how do we want to steward our lives? And for us, we're believers. And so being part of our church is really important to us. And one of the things was, well, we won't be part of a regular church for 9 months. What does that look like? Is that worth it to us? And like, it was, because we felt like we could grow from this experience. But yeah, it's not to say that you have to do something so extreme and out of the box in order to have that fulfillment, because that's not true either. So
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you just said, that I think people look at that and be like, oh yeah, if I could just do what they did, if I could just have the life of this person that I follow on Instagram, then of course I'd be so
yeah.
happy. And I think part of what this conversation has revealed is, yeah, it was amazing, and it's a life, it's the opportunity of a lifetime that you did, but it didn't all of a sudden magically give you fulfillment just
Yeah.
because you did that. So if you're always looking
We
to
had
some
bad days. Yeah. We still got upset with each other. Yeah.
right, and it was, and
Right.
there's a reality to the trip. It's not all glamorous and Instagram photo worthy. Like there's you're just living life in those, in between spaces, in between all of those highlights. Let me ask you this experience, what do you feel like this experience taught you about your relationship with money?
I think for me, it was like, we're young, so it was one of the first experiences like I've had in my adult life that really made me feel like that money is a tool. Um, and classic saying, right? But just, I mean, it can be used and shaped to do exactly what you want, or exactly what God is leading you to do, or exactly what you want your family to experience. And if you're careful with how you shape that and really particular with how you do that, you can probably do like some things that you wouldn't have thought you could have done before. That was
I think just like in stewardship in general, right? Like whether it was money, whether it was time, more so like we're all given this and, different amounts of it, different experiences and like life setups. But basically, like we have this, what can we do with it? And we don't have to do what everyone else is doing with it. And we don't have to do what we did previously with it, or it really changed my perspective around how can we use our time? How can we use our money? Because we got to do this like great adventure. And yeah. And so I think it has shaped my perspective in that regard.
Yeah, by doing this, it gave us a perspective of like we got to step outside our lives, look at it from 1,000 feet and say like, what are we doing in our life? Do we like everything we're doing? And that was like a unique opportunity we got to do by really going after some adventure that wasn't in our typical lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love what you said, Emily. We what we're going to do is not necessarily what everybody else is going to do. We don't have to do what everybody else is going to do. I really hope, just speaking to those listening to this episode, I hope the takeaway that we're getting from this is not that everybody needs to figure out how to rent your house and cut out your gym membership and go to Europe for 9 months. Now, if that's a really important thing and that's an experience that you want to have, great, like go for it. I'm all for you making those adjustments. The point is, all of us have things that are really important to us. When we sit down, we have those moments of clarity and peace that we know this is right up there. It's top of my list. And I think what happens is we just get in our rut and our routine. We just live our lives. We go about our day, and we spend money just mindlessly on things that a lot of them just, they're really not all that important. They're really not moving the needle for our meaning, for our purpose, for our fulfillment. And sometimes what we need to do is take a little bit of that maverick spirit and say, yeah, we don't have to do what everybody else is doing. What is important to us? Let's start shifting our money away from the dumb stuff and towards the stuff that's really, really important. And I just admire people doing that in different ways. And I love your story of how you did that. And I just want to encourage people to be able to do that, however that may look for them. So let's finish here, because before we started recording, we were talking, and you've got some new things in the works. I don't know how much you may or may not want to share, but part of this new adventure that you're on now, I think, was prompted by this experience, and it caused a little bit of like, reflection. What if? So if you don't mind, Josh and Emily, tell us about what you've got going on in the works, and we'll finish with that.
Yeah. So, thanks. It's awesome. I love all those thoughts. It's great. Yeah. So at the end of this, we just kind of came to the perspective of like, what do we want to change in our life? Like, do we like everything we're doing in our life? And, a lot of that was yes, but some of it was like, I think like we could change like how a lot of our time is going to earning our paychecks, essentially. And how do we change that? That's like, I think we can change allocating that by potentially starting like a business and figuring out ways to be creative with that. And so we started a property management company. We manage vacation properties on top of our day jobs. So there's a lot going on right now. And we're growing that. Those properties are also in Alaska. So that's an interesting world as well. So
I won't ask you to re-explain all of that, but I was like, Alaska, but there's a good reason for that. Yeah, really cool.
There's some reasons that, so yeah, we're building that on the side now, with the hopes that it grows enough to give us more unique opportunities, in our life that maybe we couldn't have with, our typical schedule. Because even while we had our amazing experience, we still did have to come back, and we still would have to.
We were working 2 to 10, 2 to 11
we
every
were
day.
working. It wasn't vacation, so
Yeah.
we don't want to like go and do that for 9 months every year or anything, but we had our fun. We're gonna have kids and all that, so we're gonna
Yeah, that's
Right,
another
yeah.
thing. We're growing a family and we have a baby on the way.
Congratulations. Okay, so full disclosure, I did know that, but I didn't know if I wanted to throw that out on the podcast.
Yeah,
so-
you can. And
Right.
I
we
just
can get the
did,
official
so-
congratulations.
Yeah.
Yes, good.
yeah, business, baby. I mean, there's different things.
Yeah,
going on.
business and a baby.
Yeah, we could talk about all this stuff forever, but yeah, so some moving parts and essentially just building on the thought you had that we were like, we can use all of this time and steward this time and this money and the time we're spending to earn our paychecks, to earn our money, and really just figure out exactly what do we want our life to look like, define that, and then make the changes necessary to try to make it happen.
Yeah, I love that. Well, if people want to connect with you, I don't know if they want to learn more about your property management business, where can people find you, connect with you, anything you want to plug before we go?
Yeah,
What do you want to
I'll,
plug? We plug different things.
I know. I'll plug our business. So it's called Hallson Properties. Our last name's Hall, Hall. Emily's maiden name is Julson, so Hallson,
Yeah.
Hallson Properties. So that website, it's actually still being built. We're very new. We have a few properties, but it's going to be up.
Get that website built, and then by the time I throw this podcast up, then people will be able to
Right.
find it.
By the time you throw it up,
What is it going to be?
It'll be-
HallsonProperties.com?
yeah, it's HallsonProperties.com. We already have all that. So it's, yeah, just go to HallsonProperties.com. You'll find all of our contact information there.
And if you want to look at our travels, it's on Instagram.
I mean, we haven't really even been on Instagram
Huh,
since our
we
travels.
didn't even say we were home. It just stopped. But it's all
Yeah.
around _ the world, right?
Yeah, all around
Yeah,
the world.
Which was
so,
kind of just fun for us to.
but yeah, you can
document.
scroll through that whole Instagram. We did a reel or post for every place we went. So
Lots of
there's
recommendations.
a
Yeah.
lot, tons of recommendations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, last thing is you gotta write a book or a blog or some kind of guide for how to travel Europe for 9 months for $15,000. I think that would be a bestseller. Well, Josh, Emily, man, I love the conversation. Thanks so much for joining me. Thanks everybody for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.